everybody? It's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. We're starting a new unit today on World War II. Now, World War II is everybody's fan favorite at the start of the semester. While that is an accurate assumption because there's so many cool stories to talk about, World War II is complicated. World War II is much more complex than World War I. Kind of by design is designed to be more complex than World War I because the same people are basically going to fight each other again. They have about a 18-year halftime, really, between World War I and World War II. When World War II starts, they actually have to rename the Great War into World War I. So they had to take a break, more or less, because they were out of people. And a lot of crazy stuff happens here in the 1920s and the 1930s that's going to cause World War II to happen, which is still, to present day, the most catastrophic and crazy war and death and casualties and however you want to view it that has ever happened in the history of the world. So we're going to start talking about that today and some of the long-term causes, some of the major players, some of the people that come to power, like Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Mussolini. We're going to talk about those guys here today. Oh, you're going to like this. Let's go ahead and get started. So World War II doesn't just come out of nowhere and just instantaneously start. It actually builds up over time. There are actual people who kind of saw this was going to happen before it did. The United States actually being one of them, that you put too many things in place that can cause conflict, and conflict is going to happen. And the United States kind of saw this before other people, and we're going to talk about that at the end of today's lesson about how America felt about this growing tension. So, World War II really comes down to very eccentric people that are, more or less, trying to take over the world. A lot of that comes from the fact that everybody is really struggling with the Great Depression. We're going to talk about a lot of these guys today that come out in Europe, your Stalins, your Mussolinis, your Hitlers, even Franco. The reason, and this is a big one for World War II as we get started here, before we get into all the cool stories, why did all these men come to power? The economy. Money. People didn't have jobs. People were struggling. Countries were desperate. They needed a strong leader to come out and fix everything for them. And they're all going to get it. They're all going to get their strong leader, and they're going to give them all this power to do it. That is what allowed these guys to rise to power. And they did so with the support of their people. So we're going to talk about them here today. And it's kind of crazy how what these guys do actually earned them support. So one of the first guys we need to talk about here, actually the first guy, is a guy named Joseph Stalin. All right. So Joseph Stalin is going to be a dictator over Russia. So this is a picture of Joseph Stalin here. All of these guys we're going to talk about are totalitarian rulers. It means they rule completely totally. All right. So totalitarian means complete and total control over every aspect of their people's lives that they represent or are in charge of. Now, it's real easy to lump like Stalin here and Hitler, who we're going to talk about today, who are both crazy dudes who do awful things to their own people, into the same group. Stalin is in Russia. Germany, which is where Hitler is Hitler's in Germany. Germany and Russia hate each other with a passion. Historically, since America has had beef with both of them over time at different points, America likes to view Russia and Germany almost interchangeably. They are not. Very different cultures, different languages, even religiously practice things differently, completely different from each other, and they don't like each other. So while Joseph Stalin is going to be a totalitarian here, and he's going to be a communist, and we'll talk about him like being a bad guy, all right? And then we'll talk about Hitler and him being a Nazi and being a totalitarian ruler as well. He's going to be, a Nazi, not a communist, and we're going to talk about him being a bad guy. Since both of these guys are bad guys, you'd like to simplify and think they got along. Hitler and Stalin are going to hate each other with a passion. Russia and Germany have hated each other for thousands of years for a variety of reasons. So understand that while we talk about these guys and all these bad guys that kind of come out today, don't oversimplify that and think these guys liked each other, especially Stalin and Hitler. So Stalin, he is here in Russia. Now Russia, since it has become communist, refers to itself a lot of time as the USSR or the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union is Russia, which is the big red area here, plus all these smaller countries that they control, all right? That collectively is referred to as the Soviet Union that Stalin would be in charge of, all right? So this country is enormous. I mean, the country below it, right? That's China, all right? So Russia owns a bunch of stuff, all right? Now, that picture in particular is dealing with later on because they take over more stuff as we go. But generally speaking, Russia plus the countries that they own are collectively referred to as the Soviet Union. And there's one guy that rules it all, in this case, Stalin. So totalitarianism is the idea that a government controls complete and total control over their society. Stalin happens to be a totalitarian leader and uses the government concept of communism, where everybody's mandated to be equal as his government way of doing things. There are a lot of different ways to have a totalitarian government. These are the three main totalitarian leaders that we're going to talk about here today: Mussolini, Stalin, and Hitler. All right, so Stalin. So let's go back to this picture right here for a second. Russia's big. Now, the problem with Russia is they're having trouble feeding people. This was a huge issue after the Treaty of Versailles, after the end of World War I. In the 1920s, people were like starving here, and your thought is, well, they have so many people because it's so big, that's probably their issue. You are partially right. They do have a lot of people. There's a huge population in Russia. One of the more important things to understand here is most, or at least half of Russia is like so far north, it's like in the Arctic Circle. You can't even grow food in the northern part. There's also not a huge population in the northern part of Russia, but there is a large population below it. So they do have too big of a population, and they are struggling to grow food. Again, because most of their country, you can't even grow food in it. So what does Stalin do when he comes to power? He takes over from Lenin. He's kind of the appointed guy to take over after Vladimir Lenin dies. Vladimir Lenin started being a leader when he was really old. So he already picked Stalin to take over for him. So when Stalin takes over, here in the middle, all right, when Stalin takes over, he's got to fix this food problem. So what Stalin does is he uses this concept of collectivization. He just goes and takes over everybody's farm, right? Just as government owns your farm now. If you have a problem with them, he just takes you out in the street and has you shot. Now, he doesn't personally do it, but he has people do it. And you're like, wait, what? He just shoots people? Yeah. World War II gets crazy when we start talking about these people. It is a all or nothing mentality, all right? Fascism, all right? Totalitarianism, it's all about what is best for the country or the state, not what's best for the individual people. You as a person are disposable. Your rights don't matter. Nothing about you really matters. The only thing that really matters is the country as a whole. So if you need to be sacrificed for the betterment of the country, there's no question about that among these people. So to get more food, they basically take everybody's individual farms, they like fire everybody, or they take everybody's farm and then merge them into make these huge mega farms called collectives. Then he makes the farmers that used to work on that come over and like by force or requires them to work on that farm to mass produce for everybody. What's crazy is this is actually effective. He is able to feed like 95% of the population, and there is no more food shortage. And even though people lost their private property, most people were fine. All right. And so this is some propaganda here that he has of, we're all working together for the betterment of Russia. And then this happy woman here who's like, look how much extra corn we have for everybody. However, if you heard me say, most people were happy with this. So Ukraine, for a variety of reasons, which is something that Russia owns, to make sure everybody else has enough food, they purposely are starved to death. That's right. He purposely starves to death an entire portion of his population so that everybody else has food. This is like normal totalitarian work in World War II. Yes, millions of people are going to sit here and starve and die, and I did that, but it's for the greater good of everybody. So I'm cool with it. This is wild, but this is the mentality. We'll talk about Hitler and the Holocaust. 13 million people of Hitler's own people he killed. Stalin, if you take in everything into account, all these decisions that he makes, he killed over 20 million of his own people. But again, this mentality of these guys coming to power is what's best for everybody, not what's best for the individual person. And they have to kill large groups of people for the betterment of the state, which is what they refer to as their country. The state of their country, do it no questions asked. So the question here is, how did Stalin's decision to starve part of his population actually make him more effective than previous leaders in Russia? Now, I really want to use the word instead of effective, is popular, make him more popular. He's a communist leader. Popularity didn't matter. He was going to stay in charge. However, he had a lot of support from this. As crazy as that sounds, he solved their problem of starving. Now, granted, there are still people starving, but they died already. So hooray, no more problem. This actually made him, so I got the word I wanted to use was effective. He effectively solved their problem. He starved people to death, people that weren't producing, and took their supplies from them. He effectively starved one part of the population so that everybody else could survive, as opposed to everybody collectively slowly starving to death. This was completely acceptable at the time period, which is crazy. All right, so that's Stalin. Stalin's coming to power. He's there in Russia. Let's talk about our next guy here. Benito Mussolini. So Benito Mussolini is very important in World War II. He's probably, of the major players here, he is probably one of the least known to you here. So Benito Mussolini, he is a general, and he is going to be in the country of Italy. All right, so you see Italy looks like a boot. So he comes to power different than Stalin. Stalin had been like hand-selected by Vladimir Lenin. So when Vladimir Lenin died, Stalin naturally took over. So Mussolini, the situation with Mussolini is that Mussolini is a general in the Italian military. All right, he's a high-ranking general. Their leadership is struggling in Italy. Italy is still being crushed economically. Again, economics, finance, food, basic stuff is what's going to cause people to be desperate that support these extremists to come to power. Italy was no different. Massive amounts of unemployment in Italy. Trains didn't run on time. People were starving to death. Nobody had jobs. Nobody knew what to do. And Benito Mussolini is a general in the military. And he decides, I can do it better than everybody else. So, and this is literally one of the issues of the Roman Empire. His soldiers were more committed to him as a person than they were to actually Italy. So when he decides to take his troops and march on Rome, which is the capital of Italy, and basically attempt to take over Italy, everybody, his soldiers are like, cool, let's do it. Which seems crazy, but especially since that had happened in the Roman Empire over and over again. So Benito Mussolini, the name of his army, he calls them the Black Shirts. And he decides he is going to attempt to violently take over Italy and become the leader. When he marches into Rome, Rome actually just quits and says, oh, thank goodness you're here. Huh, so you can have it. So Mussolini in the 20s comes in, and he's one of the first ones that are going to aggressively militarily take over. He marches into Rome and takes it over, and there's no fighting. Because the government is so inept, they just like, good, you want it, you can have it, and they just dip out. All right? So Mussolini, willing to fight his own people and start a civil war to take over, doesn't even have to. It's just given to him. So now, it's his problem. Mussolini, within a few weeks, is able to walk out on a balcony, and one of these mini speeches that he gives here, and he says, I am Mussolini. Obviously, they know who he is at this point. He says, there is no longer any unemployment in the entire country of Italy. All the trains run on time. Nobody is starving to death. And we have the largest military on earth. He goes out and he can say this within 3 weeks of taking over. When he is able to go out there and say this, guess how the Italian people feel about him? They love him. They're like, heck yeah, Mussolini. Absolutely. Mussolini is incredibly popular in Italy. He just shows up and he fixes everything. Because he said he fixed everything. So this is when people are desperate, they don't look at logic. Mussolini can say all this because he has a mouth that can say things. None of that is true. Right? He tells people they're not starving to death. A guy on the street corner is like, that's fantastic as he's starving to death. Says everybody has a job. The massive amount of unemployment. People are like, look at him fixing everything. Absolutely crazy. And so what's important about Mussolini here, not only is the Italian people desperately wanting to believe him, all right, is that the way he presented this. This is another one of his big speeches. Look at these hordes of people. This is how he talked to his people. He stands up, he's like, Mussolini, we have done all this great stuff. He just, like, he's super hyped all the time. But if you go talk to him in person, like, hey, Mussolini, good speech. He's like, yeah, it's a good speech. Like, that's kind of, he has, like, one ability of communicating. It's like communicating in these grand gestures. So he, too, like Stalin, but and encompasses it more. This concept of fascism. The idea that the state is more important than you as an individual. All right? As long as we all pull together and we work for the state, we're doing well. People buy into this. When Stalin tells everybody he has the largest military on earth and that he has fixed everything, all of his people believe it. You know who else believes it? The rest of the world. There's a guy we're going to talk about here in a second named Adolf Hitler. When Adolf Hitler comes out and comes into power, you know who he models his way of doing things after? Is actually going to be Mussolini. Because he's like, Mussolini did it, he came to power and he fixed all this stuff. What's crazy is Mussolini's actually not doing any of the stuff he claims he does. Italy's really no better off. They just think they are. But when Hitler comes out, he actually does the things that Mussolini claims he's doing and has a ton of success with it. Which begs the question, why didn't Mussolini just actually do the stuff that he was saying he was doing and it would have been beneficial? But he's more all about what it looks like. He's an image guy. It wants to look good. Best example of that is he gave out these medals when World War II starts and Italy gets involved and they need troops and all this other stuff. He would give out medals, and this one I always thought was crazy, to women who had more than 5 kids. That they were, this is a medal they got. Mussolini gave it to them personally. They bring in all the women who's had more than 5 kids because these are future soldiers that they can send off to battle and for the future of Italy. And then, in this particular one here, for every child you have over 5, you get a ribbon added to your medal. So this woman here had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 kids. 14 kids for Italy. And Mussolini would give them medals. So it's all about the image. But Mussolini rose to power because he told everybody he would fix things. And then said he fixed it. Mussolini is going to be in power for almost 20 years. And he is very well respected until the very end. Once they realize that he's a big fat liar, he loses all credibility. But leading up to that, he is very popular. So the question here is, how did Benito Mussolini rise to power in Italy? So pause me, answer that completely, and we'll move on. So, the next guy we're going to talk about today, Hitler and Nazis. So Hitler, this is a picture of Hitler's campaign on the left and him giving a speech on the right. If I ask you, who's the most evil person in the history of the world? Generally speaking, people are like Hitler. You're not really going to be wrong on that, all right? Because that's a subjective thing. You can't. That's an opinion. You could rank a lot of evil people. Hitler's definitely up there. He's on the short list. So people assume that Hitler is this psychopath that everybody was terrified of, and he just went in and did whatever he wanted to, and he pointed a gun at him and said, "You're gonna do what I want you to do." And like, okay, do whatever. That's not what happens. There's a reason we talk about Hitler so much in modern day. This happened last century. We still talk about it. You can't get in an argument with somebody over really anything else. Somebody talking about Hitler, because Hitler's the extreme version of things. So why is Hitler so commonly referenced today? Well, here's why. The Holocaust, and we're going to talk about that in a later lesson because it is incredibly important to understand. He's going to kill 13 million of his own people, 6 million of which are Jews, and he does it out of racist hatred towards other people. All right? So hopefully you have at least heard the term Holocaust. We'll talk about it if you haven't. So looking back on it, you're like, how did that guy come to power? Hitler came to power because people voted him in. Technically, now he had a bunch of shady practices on the side. Technically, he comes to power legally. Hitler runs for... Their government's designed a little bit different. So he is a Nazi. All right. The Nazi Party gains power once he kind of joins it in the 1920s. He actually, let me back up a little bit. Hitler was a World War I soldier. All right. He was such a poor soldier, Germany wouldn't even let him join the German military. He actually had to join Austria's military, where he is from, all right, which is a neighboring country that's friends with Germany. Joins Austria's military, and then Austria's military helps out Germany in World War I. All right. He survives World War I, and then because of the Treaty of Versailles was so mean to Germany after World War I, the entire German economy collapses in the 1920s, and Hitler is a homeless guy on the street trying to make money by selling paintings. He tries to go to art school. That's right, Hitler is a painter. Tries to go to art school, couldn't get in, so he's like a homeless guy on the streets. And pretty much Hitler decides, let's take over the world. Like that was his plan B, take over the world. So Hitler, he goes and joins up with a political party that had just got started, probably has like 3 people involved in it, called the Nazi Party. Hitler likes what they say, and he internalizes a lot of what the Nazi Party says. The Nazi Party's idea is that the reason the rest of the world hates Germany, not because they were blamed for World War I, is because they're jealous. The rest of the world is jealous of Germany because German people are better than them, and therefore they want to keep Germany down because they feel inferior to the German people. So the Nazi Party from the beginning has this idea that the German race of people are better than everybody else. And Hitler at this first meeting is like, may I say a few words? Hitler, and that's why I want to keep this picture up here with him giving a speech. Hitler's ability to speak is basically one of the greatest ever. He can convince anybody of anything. And he is very, very good public speaking. So he can give these, just like Mussolini, he can just stand up and be like, oh, Germany's the best. We don't let, telling everybody that they're better than everybody else, which people like to hear that. All right. He tells everybody that they're better. And he gains some popularity. There is a whole time period here, I'm jumping over because we don't have a ton of time to talk about Hitler, in which he does try to, at first, before he starts running for office, he tries to overthrow the government, and they say no, and they shoot the people that were with him, and then arrest him and put him in jail. All right. When he is in jail, he writes a book, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. He writes a book called Mein Kampf. All right. And he becomes, people are so, once he writes Mein Kampf, he gets more popular, and he gets out of jail. All right. And when he gets out of jail, this is when he runs for the government. All right. And he's going to get very popular. So he runs as a Nazi. The Nazi Party is him. There's people all around the country that campaign. The Nazi Party gets elected in with the understanding that Adolf Hitler will be the leader of the Nazi Party. As the leader of the Nazi Party, he comes into power, and he is appointed as chancellor over the government. What Hitler does as soon as he gets into the government is he basically says, oh yeah, the rest of the government, y'all no longer exist. I'm in charge. Which is weird. You would think everybody would say no. But Hitler has gotten very popular at this point. And I'll tell you why in a second. He's gotten very popular at this point. And when he just says the rest of the government is over, I am the complete controller forever, people are like, yes, Hitler comes to power with the support of the people of Germany. What? Why? Well, here's why. Germany's economy is destroyed. He promises if you elect him, he's going to fix everything. He's going to put everything back the way it was. He's actually going to make Germany super successful. He promises everybody everything. German people have to make no sacrifices. You get everything. Elect me and all your dreams will come true. I mean, literally, I don't know if he actually says all your dreams will come true if you elect me, but more or less that's exactly what he says. He just tells everybody what they want to hear. And he is elected. Well, now he actually has to do some work. Interesting enough, this is an actual picture, or this is a graph so he is elected in 1932, and you can tell that the benefits of Germany actually start going up pretty quick. Yes, it's with inflation and all, but if you look at the blue bars, that is the GDP. All right. Germany was devastated. Hitler takes over, and all of a sudden, Germany starts doing a lot better. This is another one. The industrial production is not just a shell game. He puts people to work. He creates the Autobahn, an interstate highway system, puts people to work. He turns around and creates a car company because they're going to have new roads. The name of that car company? Volkswagen. That's still around today. Hitler does a whole bunch of stuff that actually benefits the economy. Germany really does a fantastic job turning around their entire economy when Hitler is elected. He is loved in Germany. All right. The name of his army guys that he has, he calls them the brown shirts because they have their own name. He is loved. This is him driving to everybody, wants to shake his hand, high five him. People love Hitler. If Hitler had died in 1936 of natural causes, because he had a health scare, if he had died in 1936, there is a school of thought, and they probably wouldn't be wrong, that Hitler would have been considered the greatest leader in the history of Germany had he died of natural causes in 1936. He doesn't die of natural causes in 1936. He's not going to die for another 9 years after that through suicide. After 1936, he starts doing the Holocaust. He starts doing all these things that getting Germany in these wars and all these things that make him unpopular. But his first few years, rising to power, he has really helped out Germany. So you're thinking, okay, so he was just like a normal dude, and all of a sudden he turned crazy later on, and like nobody expected this, right? So like the German people really got caught off guard by this. Let's go back to Mein Kampf. This is the book that he wrote that made him popular. He blamed Jewish people. He said the reason all these bad things are happening in Germany are Jews. You're like, oh, yeah. He was like, and we should get rid of them all. They're awful people. And he just massive racism, like basically his exact viewpoints. He writes in a book, sells it, and becomes super popular. And you're like, so he told everybody he was going to murder them? He said get rid of them. Now here's what's crazy, all right? And this is important. Hitler wasn't the only one that was saying that. This is a common idea at the time that you get rid of. Disliking Jewish people was a common idea at the time. Being hateful was common at the time. The people he ran against in those elections that he won were saying the same hateful stuff. They weren't actually planning on acting on it, but Hitler was. That's the big difference. So we're going to talk more about this when we get to our lesson on the Holocaust. But Hitler comes out. He is a complete, total dictator, but he is actually benefiting Germany, and he teams up with Mussolini because he thinks Mussolini has all these good ideas. Mussolini realizes, oh my gosh, this guy's actually a lot stronger than I am. So Mussolini's willing to team up with him as well. So the question here is, kind of open-ended here, but get your complete sentences. How does Adolf Hitler rise to power? All right. And then this guy right here, this is not going to take long because it's Francisco Franco. We're talking about totalitarian leaders. We got to talk about Francisco Franco, I guess. So this is Spain, all right? It's 1939, World War II had actually kicked off. Here in Spain, they're having an economic crisis as well. The leader, a general, Francisco Franco, declares war on the king. Huge civil war breaks out, which means half of Spain is fighting the other half of Spain over who gets to be in charge, Francisco Franco or the king. Francisco Franco is going to win. A bunch of people are going to get killed here in this civil war, and Francisco Franco takes over. Francisco Franco, while he is a totalitarian dictator just like the other ones, we're not going to talk about him again. We're not going to talk about Spain at all in World War II because they just had a civil war and everybody's dead in Spain. Like everything in their society is on fire and destroyed. They can't help out. So while we talk about Francisco Franco, and he is a dictator at the time, he doesn't really play a big role in World War II because Spain is too destroyed to actually help out. They can't go fight another war. They just fought one and they blew themselves up. So the question here is, why does Francisco Franco play a smaller role in World War II, even though his style of leadership was similar to the other totalitarian dictators? So talk about why we're not really going to hear from him again. We just talked about that. So pause me, answer that, and we're moving on. All right. American response. So America sees Stalin, Mussolini, Hitler rise to power, Franco on a lower level. America's like, yeah, you have a whole bunch of crazy people there that think they're special and everybody else is awful. This is going to lead to a war, and America didn't gain anything out of World War One. So America lets everybody know, puts them on notice, hey, when all y'all start going to war, which is 100% going to happen, America's staying out of it. Do not come ask America for help. All right? We pass laws on ourselves called the Neutrality Acts. All right? Which specifically says if you go to war, don't ask for weapons from America. We will not give weapons. Give is the key word here. We'll come back to that. We will not give weapons to any country at war. So America wants to stay out of other people's problems. We had to show up, save everybody in World War One, and gain nothing out of it. So America kind of puts everybody on notice. Hey, this war, and we see it coming a mile away. Don't ask America for help. We're staying out of it. Y'all deal with your own problems. Don't think we're going to jump in and choose sides. All right. So while America is fully willing to defend ourselves, the idea of actually getting troops involved or sending weapons overseas was a no-go. So the question here is, why did America want to aggressively stay out of World War II before it started? Answer that completely, and we're done for the day.